Alrighty, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're here Thursday, November 3rd. Another episode of the NBA returns. A little different lineup for us tonight. We have Raj, who's out on, he's resting for a night, a little load management, because he's just not conditioned to go the full week shows. So instead, we thought who better to come in and talk about a little John Wall, Russell Westbrook trade than the owner, founder, creator, CEO, boss man, but first coffee guy, Joe Cardoso. Joe, thanks for joining us.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me. So I'm like Montrezl Harrell, the sixth man. I like it.
Yeah, pretty much coming in, rim running, getting points, doing your job. We got Henry from the patio, a little power outage in California, but he's making it. Yeah, that's what we got here today. We'll get right into it. Biggest thing, obviously, on the table here, we just saw last night the Wizards completed that trade, John Wall and a protected first-round pick going to the Rockets for Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook playing for yet another team. I think he's the fourth MVP ever to play for like three teams in 3 years or something like that. So he is on the move again. Joe, I'll kind of toss it to you first because we didn't have any discussions of this for a couple of weeks, right? It was hot for a second, and then it kind of toned down. And it seems like the GMs kind of just reconnected yesterday and just said, "Hey, let's just figure a way to do this and get the deal done." You're a resident Wizards expert. What are your thoughts on what this means for Washington? Does it put them in a playoff hunt? Do you like the deal? Like, what do you think about it?
Well, I think as far as do I like it or not like it, I have to see the team on the court first, see what kind of product they produce. I think today it's been a crazy day in Washington, D.C. I mean, sports radio has been on fire all day. A lot of people are really, really angry about it, and not so much about what John Wall did on the court, but for what John Wall stood for when he did off the court. Really, really active in the community. Also, people thought he deserved better because of that. And what I mean by deserve better was like a proper send-off rather than just a 9 o'clock or 9:30 every time it was trade for Russell Westbrook. And a lot of people not giving Russell Westbrook a chance. A lot of slander on Twitter, social media already. I think that the combination is a chance to work. I think it all depends on Russell. I mean, can he change his ways a little bit as far as like, can we limit the bad shots? When you get Russell Westbrook on your team, he's going to take some crazy ill-advised shots. Can he limit that? Has he learned anything in his stops at Oklahoma City, his stops in Houston? You like to think as a player gets older, they kind of adapt their game and change things. I mean, you're talking about Bertans, talking about Bradley Beal, a lot of really good shooters. Hopefully, Rui Hachimura can become one of those good shooters as well. So I think on paper, the Wizards have a pretty good lineup. I can see us definitely contending for the 8th or 7th seed in the East. But like I said, as far as winners and losers of this trade, I have to see both teams on paper. And I think for John Wall, if you see that 2015, 2016 Wizards John Wall for the Houston Rockets, a lot of Wizards people are going to be kicking themselves for that, man, because that guy was explosive that year. But it's been 2 years since we've seen him on the court healthy. So it's a lot of ifs on both sides.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And, to come back from the injury is going to be the biggest thing. We have him come back from the Achilles. We have Kevin Durant come back from the Achilles, and we're both kind of anxious to see how those guys are going to perform. Real quick before I go to Henry, you mentioned about Westbrook changing his game, needing to change his game possibly to help adapt. They obviously have Bradley Beal, who's coming off of, 30 points, 6 assists, kind of the guy for the Wizards last year, deservedly so. He's a very talented offensive player. Do you see a world where if Westbrook maybe doesn't change his game a lot, is that going to hamper Beal's development? Do you think Beal's going to be thrilled to play with a guy who's known for just hey, give me the ball and kind of get out of the way?
Yeah, see, I think that's something. If I'm Bradley Beal, I got to wait and see. I mean, of course, you got to figure Bradley Beal's already talked to Kevin Durant. He's already talked to Kendrick Perkins, people that have played with Russell Westbrook before, to find out, hey, I know what I read online, I know what I hear in the media. What's this guy really like on the court and off the court? And I think that Bradley Beal has definitely earned the right to be the leader of the Wizards. So if Russell Westbrook comes in here and we're not running the proper plays at the end of the game, we're taking the last shots to give the ball to Bradley Beal, we're making some of those wild plays that we've seen Russ make in the past, I think that Bradley Beal would have no problem letting it be known that, hey, this is my team and it's the way things are going to be run. And that could potentially obviously be a problem. But like I said, I'm going to give Russell Westbrook the benefit of the doubt. I mean, like you said at the top of the show, this is his third team. At some point, you got a choice. You can go the Allen Iverson route towards the end of his career, and refuse to accept where your game's at, or you can go more of that David Robinson route where he knew, hey, to achieve my goal, I got to defer to this guy, Tim Duncan. He can lead me to where I want to go. So I'm hoping that Westbrook takes the Robinson route and not the AI, I'm still a rookie of the year player route.
Okay, that's interesting. I think that's a really good, even that's a very unique comparison. I think both of the angles you just provided are pretty good. Henry, I'll kind of throw it over to you. What do you think of this trade overall? Maybe more from like a Houston side. They're not going to be running John Wall coming back from the injury. They have obviously James Harden, who was in a lot of trade rumors, but is going to still be there. Houston has no plans to trade him as of now. They signed Christian Wood. They signed Boogie. And they still have obviously like PJ Tucker and Eric Gordon, a couple of those guys. What does this trade mean for Houston as far as like keeping Harden long term, as far as their playoff chances and playoff odds this year? What do you think about that for them?
Hopefully this can bring a lot of positive outcomes for the Houston Rockets because it was reported today that James Harden preferred playing with John Wall over Russell Westbrook, which is a huge statement. You know, Russell Westbrook and James Harden have been teammates even before the Houston Rocket days. So now it's just a new dynamic. John Wall is a very ball-dominant player, but I feel like he can adjust to the Houston Rockets system, especially playing alongside James Harden. I know he had to play against or with Bradley Beal, who was another ball-dominant shooting guard. But it's the adjustment periods that I feel that they're going to come in spurts. We're going to see games that do work, games that do not work. But remember this, that John Wall is back now with DeMarcus Cousins, and he has chemistry with him since their Kentucky days. So it's going to be interesting to see how everything does pan out. I feel like this trade overall is going to positively affect the Houston Rockets more than the Washington Wizards because here's the thing. Russell Westbrook, still one of the top point guards in the league, but his play, I can see start declining from here on out. He's on his third team. It's come to that point where hopefully, you know, his athleticism doesn't start to waver because his game is mainly athleticism. And if that does start to waver, especially this season, how much can him and Bradley Beal actually go far, you know, in the Eastern Conference? So in terms of which side I think got the better end of the stick, I think the Houston Rockets at the end of the day did. But at the end of the day, also, Russell Westbrook was the 2017 NBA MVP. He's still an all-star player caliber, playing alongside another all-star caliber player in Bradley Beal. They have a lot of young guys, a lot of things to figure out. So I'm just curious to see if Russell Westbrook maybe can resurrect a 2017 type form of himself. Probably not. It's a little far-fetched, but it's interesting to see how everything will pan out.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Nice watch, by the way. It was a subtle flex when you put your arm up there earlier. I noticed that.
Flex.
My only thoughts on it, because I mean, you both kind of covered all the bases. My only thing is you know, James Harden obviously has been in the West for, you know, his entire career. He's been with Houston for the last almost decade now, maybe about 8-9 years. This is the same kind of thing we go through every year, right? And Henry, you mentioned it, him saying that, you know, the report saying that, you know, Harden wanted John Wall. He got his guy finally, right? John, you know, this is the guy Harden needed. This is he wanted. We did this 2 years ago when he got Chris Paul. I was like, Chris Paul, this is the guy that we need, that Harden wanted to play with him, a point guard who can do this. Guess what? Chris Paul stood in the corner all year and shot threes and was unhappy, and he left. Then they trade for Russell Westbrook. It was like, oh, his buddy from Oklahoma City, brothers. If anybody can handle this scenario together, it's these two. They're going to figure it out. After a year, guess what? He shipped out, and now he's got his guy. Like, it's the same routine with him. And I don't know. I'm just a little sick of it. I'm sick of the Harden spiel. Like, I'm pretty worn out of it by now. Like, we know. I think you know what we're going to get with Houston. I think Houston still makes the playoffs, with or without John Wall making an amazing contribution. I think, you know, Harden, to himself, to his credit, is good enough to carry that team to at least an 8 or 7 seed. But if I were a Rockets fan, I wouldn't be, you know, jumping over the hill. We're going to be contending for the title. You know, it doesn't matter if Boogie is 80% as good as he used to be. They have nobody to guard, you know, Jokic and AD and those guys effectively. They have no one really to guard. They traded Covington, so they don't have a wing really to even throw at LeBron or Kawhi. And then as far as the guard situation, Harden's going to do the ISO ball thing again. So I'm just not sold on it. I mean, good for the Wizards. Props to them for at least taking a swing. I feel like, you know, you got to at least take a chance out there, especially where you have Bradley Beal in the prime. So I hope that works out for them. But as far as Houston goes, I mean, they're going to do what they do every year, and it's be a little above average. They might make a couple trades midseason, and they'll be out round 1, round 2 max. But, you know, that's just how it is. We'll move on to the next thing. Just a quick touch up. Speaking of my Lakers, the defending champion Lakers, we woke up to this morning, two big news deals for them. Obviously, LeBron James choosing to kind of wipe away that player option at the end of his original 4-year deal, and instead trading it in for a 2-year extension worth about $85 million. So he's getting the bag. He's going to be a Laker at least through the end of the 2023 season, which is a footnote there. That's when possibly his son Bronny James Jr. could be coming out of high school and go directly to the NBA. So that's something to kind of put a pin in down the line. And then Anthony Davis, Lakers fans have kind of been waiting for this, assumed signing. Thought, to be honest, I was going to go with a 2 or 3 year deal because it was going to set him up for that 10 years of service where you can get the super max 290 some million, kind of like Dame and those guys have gotten. Instead, opted for a little more security, 5 years, 190 million. It's going to be with the Lakers through at least 2025. He does have an early termination option if he wants to leave after the 4th year. But I'll toss it to you again, Joe. Thoughts on the Lakers? Kind of, they're going to be hard capped. They're going to have to make a lot of deals after this year. With veterans and maybe some savvy trades, but they have their two guys locked in for the next couple of years. Where does this put them kind of moving forward?
Oh, I think for this season and moving forward, it puts them wherever they want to be. I mean, you talk about, just to kind of go back a little bit, we talk about Houston. Every team in the West improved except for the Rockets. I mean, even the Sacramento Kings, for God's sakes, improved a little bit except for Houston. So I think if you're a Lakers fan, you got to be excited about this. I mean, Anthony Davis committed. He's going to be there for the long haul. You have LeBron James, who shows no sign of wearing down. And this is a guy that puts $1 million+ towards the care of his body every year. And so far, so good as far as injuries. I mean, yeah, he had the groin pull, but that was the first time you really saw LeBron have an injury or he was out for a really long time. So, I mean, if you're the Lakers, you got to be excited. I think you're going to see a little bit of what you see with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when it comes to the Lakers. And what I mean by that is a lot of guys that still want to have the opportunity to win the championship. They want to have opportunity to play with one of the best players to ever play the game, and LeBron James. They'll take those pay cuts and take those veteran minimums for the chance to A, win a ring, and 2, play with the king. I mean, I've even heard rumors about Paul Gasol possibly coming back to LA. I think that guy still has some gas in the tank. So I'm not going to be shocked by anything I see the Lakers do. I mean, I've been trying to think about it all day. What team has won a title, and then in the season when they have won the title, has gotten as much better as Los Angeles has?
That's a great question, and there's few and far answers in between. Henry, I know you're obviously a big Lakers fan outside of your Celtics, so you obviously kind of want to echo what Joe said. But do you have any thoughts on AD maybe choosing the 5 years over 2 or 3 years? He definitely chose the long-term security, and honestly the staying in LA, playing for the Lakers, that kind of tradition. I think he wants that more so than all of the money he kind of left on the table there. What are your thoughts on the deal?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of credit has to be given to Rich Paul, their agent. So I think of it, that clutch sports is coming kind of like a little clique now. You got LeBron, you got AD, and you got other players that Rich Paul's trying to recruit into the agency. Now, they got the right man. He's playing out the right deals for the right players who are worth that type of money and security. Obviously, I feel like Anthony Davis is going to be a Laker even after LeBron retires. But honestly, who knows when LeBron's going to retire? I mean, we're talking about how he can play alongside his son or against his son. So there's a lot of things to really think about in the long term. But one of the real things is there's security there for Anthony Davis. They waited out on the contract to work something out that really shows his worth. I mean, he just came off winning a championship. He has such great chemistry with LeBron James and the rest of the Lakers. So they know they have that championship pedigree. So, I want to get paid this much for this amount of time. They have that leeway. And I was kind of thinking about it. I'm like, what other players right now have the same security as LeBron and AD in the league? I'm trying to think about it. And when I think of that, I think of Jokic and Jamal Murray may be part of that spectrum too, in terms of, they have security with the Denver Nuggets. That's their future right there. But aside from that,
your boy Tatum.
Exactly. So
it's not a duo. It's just Tatum. Tatum is the.
What about McCollum and Lillard? Lillard wouldn't fit that. Dame and CJ wouldn't be in that.
But at this point in Damian Lillard's career, he's already one of his biggest accomplishments have come in the playoffs. With 2014 beating Houston and the buzzer beater. Same thing against OKC, but they've gone to the Western Conference Finals once, and that was in 2019, and lost to the Warriors with a Kevin Durant-less Warriors. So at this point, it's I can see Damian Lillard moving on from the Portland Trail Blazers in the next probably 2 to 3 years. So that's not really longevity to me. Longevity is really what LeBron and AD are building in LA. LeBron really controls the league in that dynamic. If we're being honest here, Jordan, I think you can push on that too.
He's an ultimate GM. Yeah,
that's what they call him. I was about to say LeBum, but they call him Le GM and all these other nicknames and stuff. But it's a credit because I do believe that he holds a lot of power in the decision making in the league. Really, any team he goes to, It shows, do they have a chance? Now they have a real chance of winning. Now they're gonna bring players, the right amount of superstars and everything. He brought AD along. They won a championship. So even James Harden, there's no longevity in Houston guaranteed. Even superstar players like that, you can't really see that anymore. So it's come to think about it, and you're like, wow. So the Lakers got it figured out. Rob Pelinka, shout out to your GM Jordan. He's doing an amazing job. And to what Joe said, the Lakers got so much better this offseason, which is so crazy to think. Like, they just came off a championship where they went in each round. They went 4-1, 4-1, 4-1, and then they lose 2 games to the Miami Heat, who are still a terrific team. But I didn't expect these type of moves to be made so efficiently, soon right after. So, to your guys' points, the Lakers are in line to go back-to-back. Hopefully things don't, I don't think the Lakers are really too injury prone per se. LeBron's never been injury prone. AD's never really been injury prone. So
you curse me right now. Don't put the jinx on.
Yeah, I was like, man, what are you doing right now? About injuries, unless they happen.
Yeah, because thinking about like what can really waver the Lakers' success at this point. I don't really think anything but themselves. So I don't know what you guys think on that.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing that can really beat the Lakers right now is a significant injury to one of their, to either LeBron or AD, or
COVID,
otherworldly like kind of chemistry issues which can be happening. They brought back they brought back Caldwell Pope, who was a key part of that squad. They even bring back guys like Jared Dudley, who is going to play 15 games, but he's a huge locker room guy, and then all the players wanted him back, and that's bringing Pau Gasol, former Laker, great locker room guy. They brought in a lot of pieces that I think are going to fit well with what they're trying to build on the court and also, off the court. They got rid of one of my favorite moves is the fact that they did not end up re-signing Dwight Howard, and they traded JaVale McGee, 2 guys who are sometimes talented, but 100% of the time they're just like knuckleheads, man. They go out there and they don't have a sense of like, this is a business, right? LeBron James, this is a championship or bust every year, and like I just don't think that like those guys care about it the same way. But I'm really surprised too. If you would have told me, a month ago that the Lakers would be going out the title and have Dennis Schroeder, Montrezl Harrell, I mean those moves kind of came out of nowhere. Yeah, I thought we were going to be filling out with vet minimums and just a lot of Wesley Matthews type things. It would have been good, but this really puts them in the pole position, especially when you think about the fact they stole Harrell from the Clippers. The Clippers really didn't get any much better. Denver loses Jeremy Grant. They didn't get any better at all, and everybody else below them, I think, was at the level. Obviously, the Klay Thompson, Achilles, hurts a lot, for the Warriors. I think they would have been interesting just with their ability to have so many good guards and wing players. That would have been an interesting dynamic. But yeah, I mean, as a Lakers fan, I'm happy for it. It's nice to have that security, like Henry's talking about, long term, to have your 2 cornerstones in place. It's not only good for the on the court winning, but after this season, they're going to be very financially strapped, right? They're going to have LeBron, AD, they're going to have Caldwell Pope, and I think Marc Gasol. I think are the only guys that are actually going to have on the roster after this year. So that's going to make sure they're going to have to use their mid-level exception. They have to use vet minimum. This is going to help attract those guys to come play. Say, hey, maybe a guy who thought he was $17 million, like, hey, I'll take a $8 million discount. It means I get to play alongside LeBron and AD, potentially coming off of a second straight championship. That's really where I think the impact is going to be felt with these extensions and the max deals and everything like that. They're going to have the bird rights to go over the cap to sign Caruso, my favorite player, Horton Tucker, a couple other small pieces. And I think the next thing to do is an extension for Kyle Kuzma. It's probably going to be a little bit more than he would deserve, and it's going to be criticized. But the reasoning behind that is they're going to sign him to the extension so that way when they don't have a lot of players on the roster, if they need to end up moving him, he's going to have the salary at that level that they can swap him and a draft pick for another player or something like that. Instead of it being on like a $2 million contract, he might go up to like $50 million, which might seem a little much given the fact that he hasn't produced at quite the level that they've wanted. But if they need to make a move for somebody and that contract is around $13 million, they'll be able to do it without having to worry about salary cap issues. So that makes sense. Yeah. There's a lot of financials that go into it. My head was kind of spinning reading the stuff today, but that's what we're going to be seeing here. We'll move on. I know I love talking about the Lakers. We can move on to other stuff as well. We have opening night coming up in about 2.5 weeks, 22nd of December. It's a Tuesday before Christmas. It's 2 games on a slate, TNT doubleheader. Warriors at the Nets, which is going to be, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving facing Kevin Durant's former team where he finally won his championships. What are your guys' thoughts on that? The Warriors, obviously, we mentioned the Klay Thompson injury. It's going to be a slightly different matchup than we thought, but maybe not. I don't need necessarily your thoughts on like how it's going to play out, but just your thoughts on kind of both of those teams and where they're going to be. Henry, we can start with you this time if you want, because I know your phone's dying there.
Well, I saw a pretty interesting piece on the Warriors by a writer from USA Today who he really thinks that Steph Curry, regardless of the Klay Thompson injury, can still lead the team to the playoffs, but I'm talking about deep into the playoffs. And I'm like, you know what? That may not be too far-fetched to think about because he is a 2-time MVP. He is a 3-time champion. I always talk about pedigree and having the experience and everything, and he has that experience, especially because he came up with this Warrior squad in the Monte Ellis days, losing so much. So he's faced adversity before. Has he overcome it? Yeah, he's overcame adversity many, many times. So I do believe that the Warriors were one piece away, and that was Klay Thompson. Obviously, his injury happened. It's a shame to see his Achilles just go out like that right before the season started. So there's a lot of it factors. Hopefully, Kelly Oubre Jr. can step up his own game. We saw glimpses of that happen in Phoenix alongside Devin Booker. So there's just so many things to pan out. Is Steve Kerr finally going to have to coach? Like, in all honesty, because when Kevin Durant, when everybody was healthy, Draymond, Klay Thompson, Steph, and KD, how much coaching did Steve Kerr really have to do in order to get that team deep into the playoffs and win multiple championships? I don't think that much to his credit, honestly. Like, now this is a testimony to Steve Kerr as well. Like, how much can he push this team, a team that's probably running with one leg right now, into the season?
Steve Kerr, man, ouch.
Yeah.
Henry, so shots out here, boy. God,
you're right by him. Like, you're not that far. Like,
hey. But here's the thing: like, stick Steve Kerr into the Pistons. At the end of the day, you're gonna need the talent on the floor. If I get Vinny Del Negro off of into a contract and put him into the Warriors, I guarantee you they go into a deep playoff run. If that that whole KD team. At the end of the day, there's a video of Steve Kerr trying to lecture Kevin Durant during a game to pass the ball and everything, and Kevin Durant just straight up ignored him. It just really shows how much power dynamic did he really have as a coach with those type of players. Now, this is the testimony to him. Can he have an actual deep playoff run without having that much leverage? Can he show that he's probably like a Greg Popovich type of style in terms of longevity as a coach and basketball IQ as a coach? Because he can only say so much and he can only do so much, but at the end of the day, it's the execution of the talent on the floor. Now, yeah, like I said, Klay Thompson unfortunately is out, but Steph Curry is that talent. Let's not forget that. And Steve Kerr, I'm putting more pressure on him, and I hope he listens some way to this for him to really step that up, because I do want to see the players go deep in the playoffs. Why? Because I miss Steph Curry, and I want to see him do well.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, especially, Kerr, I think, comes from that Phil Jackson discipleship, right? He played on those Bulls teams in the second half of that second three-peat, and has a kind of a fair style of hey, let's keep the energy good. You see his talks with Steph Curry all the time about he's not just coaching him. He's talking about, hey, look at the box, look at your plus minus, look at your impact. He's a very personal level coach, kind of like Phil Jackson was, the ability to connect with each player. Draymond is not Dennis Rodman, but he has some of those explosive tendencies, and they've gone to battle at times, but he's been able to get through to him. So it's an interesting dynamic. I feel bad, obviously, that Klay got hurt. I really didn't want to see any major injuries this year. And, especially with the Warriors, I'd like to say that the Lakers could beat them at full strength. That's what you want. You want to play teams at their best and beat them at their best. That way there's no discrepancies in the history books when everybody looks back. Joe, your thoughts kind of on that opening night, or, if you want to talk about maybe either the Warriors or the dynamic. We obviously have the Kyrie KD dynamic, which is, I feel like it's going to be uneven all year. I feel like there's a lot of new parts there. You have a young, unproven coach in Steve Nash, although he was great on the court. This is his first chance off the court. There's a lot of, I don't know. I feel like it could be a circus act all year. They could win a championship. I feel like there's a lot of different levels for the Nets to reach at this year.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things I'll be watching this NBA season is how Brooklyn how Brooklyn performs. I'm intrigued by that. From the Kyrie and KD dynamic, Kyrie asked Kevin Durant to come to Brooklyn. He's there now. Then you have a guy who's never been a head coach before, but he's a former point guard. So we assume that him and Kyrie will be aligned as far as their vision of how the team should perform. So I'm excited to see that. And of course, being a hometown guy, I mean, being from the Maryland area, living in Maryland now, Kevin Durant's a hero around these parts. So to see him come back and be 100% healthy and just be the nastiest mid-range, nastiest scorer in the NBA again, I'm looking forward to that. And of course, anybody who knows me knows I'm a Golden State hater. And it's funny. My favorite Warrior was Klay Thompson. So to see him go down with injury was definitely tough for me as well. But I do recognize greatness when I see it, and I see that in Steph Curry. So I think that you got to remember this is a guy that missed a whole lot of time last season. So if you don't think he's chomping at the bit to remind everybody who he is and what it's all about, a lot of teams in the NBA that don't know that are going to find out pretty quickly. But with the Brooklyn Nets, I'm really excited to see how that works out. Like, will those guys, to Henry's point, will Kyrie listen to Steve Nash when he gets on him for missing KD on the wing, or getting on KD for not getting back on defense, or they brush him to the side? I mean, of course, anybody who follows the NBA knows the players have a lot, if not all, the power. Mm-hmm. But to a certain extent, they respect what the coaches say as well. So that's going to be something we're going to have to pay attention to as well. It's probably one of the most interesting storylines among the thousands of storylines you have for this new season is what's going to happen in Brooklyn.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think I really don't have a read on it. I said they could win the title, and I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. And they could lose in the first round, and I could also not totally be surprised.
It's not make it at all.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, I hope that Kevin Durant is, as every bit as good as he once was, before he tore the Achilles. So yeah, I know he's a PG County guy, right? That's what you're referring to him there in the area. Yep, I lived the county over. I remember there's a lot of good dudes that you don't hear about that come from PG County. And Kevin Durant obviously is the best of them. The other matchup we obviously have an opening night is going to be the Lakers. It'll be them hosting the Clippers this year. It was switched last year. They were technically the road team. So we talked about the Lakers enough. The Clippers have kind of had that article surface in the last couple of days about their chemistry issues. Kawhi and Paul George getting this preferential treatment, their own trainers, basically just being catered to it at every turn, and it kind of alienated some of the players, and I think rightfully so. And then you had Paul George's comments about how, one of the reasons they blew the 3-1 lead is because Doc Rivers wasn't making a lot of adjustments, and obviously he took a lot of flack for that on social media because he didn't make his own adjustments those last couple games as well. Joe, your thoughts on I don't think the Clippers got better this offseason. Not that they're not going to be good. I'm not going to disrespect them with that. I don't know if they necessarily got better, and they clearly still have a lot of issues to work out amongst themselves. What do you think they could possibly do this season?
Yeah, I think for the Clippers, they have a lot to prove. I mean, they were the most popular girl at the dance last season, right? Everybody was like, oh my gosh, Kawhi's back home. Paul George is back home. It's finals or bust. And then even when they went to the bubble, a lot of people were like, man, it's the Clippers and then everybody else. And then, of course, what happened when they faced the Denver Nuggets team and got punched in the mouth 4 times and got knocked out. So they have a lot to prove. And I mean, one thing about Kawhi Leonard, he's never been a real public guy, but you have to assume, even with COVID-19, this guy's been working out, practicing. He says he doesn't read and doesn't listen to stuff people say. I call BS on that. I think this guy, we're recording this right now, he's probably taking his 400th jumper of the day right now. I think he's going to come back with that hunger to show everybody why he should be considered one of the best players in the world. And I think for a new head coach coming into the situation he's coming into, it's not ideal as well. I mean, the article didn't help at all. And then also Paul George's comments on the Smoke show with Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson, kind of throwing Doc Rivers under the bus a little bit after Doc Rivers already left, on top of the article. Just like you said, Jordan, a lot of housekeeping they got to do. A nice, good Zoom meeting with the whole team to get everybody's feelings out. Let's get everything out in the air. Let's kumbaya up, get some good vibes flowing, because it's not going to be easy. Like we've been saying, all the teams in the West have improved, and the Clippers have not. Something to watch out for.
Not been a big Clippers fan over the years, especially once they had their Lob City. I was one of those people that was always against it and never thought they had a chance to win the title realistically. And, then when they got Kawhi and Paul George, I was like, man, like as much as I'm, here for the Lakers, I picked them to win last year at multiple points before the bubble. Once they got to the bubble, all that kind of stuff. So I was as surprised as anyone when they blew the lead. But now knowing what we know, it's maybe not so much as surprising. And it's one of those things. You can mess with Doc Rivers and give him a fair part of that blame pie, if you will, for, he's got a couple of those on his record, blowing 3-1 leads, blowing 3-2 leads. And maybe he doesn't make the adjustments as he should. And maybe he, kind of caters to the stars a little bit too much and doesn't worry about the whole team as much as he should. But at the same time, these guys have to go out there and play. I mean, you're telling me that you have – not only did they blow the 3-1 lead, they had leads in games 5, 6, and 7 at halftime. So it's not like you were losing from start to finish in games 5 or 7 and nobody did anything. You choked on your own. I'm really going to put a lot of blame on Kawhi for this play because I thought he was still pretty good. But Lou Williams stunk. Montrezl Harrell was almost unplayable, although I hope that's different this year. But he had his flaws exposed. And Paul George, who was supposed to be – this is the guy that 2 years ago I wrote an article
MVP conversation.
Yeah, I wrote an article 2 years ago before I knew you, and I put it on my blog saying that he should be – there is a chance for him to win the MVP, the Defensive Player of the Year, and Most Improved. That's how good he was that year for the Thunder, where he was good on both ends. And then he stunk in the playoffs. And now it's like one of those things looking back, it's like this is kind of a reoccurring thing. This guy he hasn't gotten it done in the playoffs since those years in Indiana where he went toe-to-toe with LeBron and kind of emerged. And I think maybe that foot injury, the ankle injury has part to do with it, which is obviously not his fault. But at the same time, you're going to go out there and no-show those last couple of games, especially Game 7. It was like I still thought the Clippers were going to win that Game 7. I thought, Kawhi and Paul George are going to step up, and they had the experience. And Paul George goes out there and is 3 for 14. We know the three-pointer out of the backboard. It's, been talked about. I'm not even going to, pat down that stat again, but he just, for him to sit there on, on a podcast and just throw everybody else under the bus, but, himself, as anybody will tell you, LeBron, any of those big names will tell you, it starts with looking in the mirror first before anything can happen. So I think it's a little ridiculous, but I don't think they got better. That's the main point. This
is going to be very interesting to see walking to the gym. It's going to be really –
And if Raj were here, Raj will tell you, he's not really, a big Ty Lue fan. He doesn't think Ty Lue did a lot for the Cavs anyway, especially in terms of X's and O's. So maybe they probably didn't really even upgrade at that level. And then, like I said, you lose Harrell. They're potentially going to be trading Lou Williams in the next couple of weeks, so they could be losing both of their bench guys. And then, I like Kawhi, and I think he's a great player. He's one of the 3 best guys we have in this league. It is about time for him to step up vocally and be a leader. I understand that that's been his thing his whole time. He's been quiet. He's the quiet leader. He'll just show you what his play. But if you really want to lead a team to a title, you've seen it, right? You've seen it with Michael Jordan. You've seen it with Kobe and Shaq. You've seen it with LeBron. You do have to step up and be that vocal presence as well. It's very rare. Even Tim Duncan was more vocal than people realize on the court and off the court with his teammates. He just didn't always show it, 100% of the time, but he showed it when they needed it to. So Kawhi does have to step up there. And honestly, the Clippers, you can't give. There's preference. There's a little preferential treatment to your stars, making sure LeBron and AD get taken care of certain things. The Lakers are obviously doing that, but there's a line in the sand where you can't just be letting, they're saying Kawhi was allowed to live in San Diego and he was late to every practice and game or for flights to go onto road games. Him and Paul George essentially had the freedom to cancel practice when they didn't want to or refuse playing time. There's a difference between a workplace balance and then letting the inmates run the asylum.
But I also wonder too, Jordan, how much of that might be Steve Ballmer. And what I mean by that is over the Clippers, you wanted to make this big splash that LA is our town now. We're taking over. He really, it was important to him and to Doc Rivers to get this big free agency splash. You hit a home run 2 times with getting Kawhi Leonard and getting Paul George. So I wonder if ownership was like, man, now that we got him, we can't lose him. So what do you guys need? Well, I need to live in San Diego. I need my homeboy to be my trainer. I need this guy to be my personal chef. Hey, I don't want to practice on Tuesdays. Okay, guys, whatever you want, just keep them happy because we're making money in the box office. We're on national television more than we ever have in the history of our franchise. So I wonder how much that played a role and them being allowed to do pretty much whatever they want to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not a Steve Ballmer guy. I think he's just there's a difference between being excited and being a passionate owner like Mark Cuban is, and then just being super annoying and over the top. And that's what Steve Ballmer is. It's just not for me. I know some people like him. I haven't heard anything negative about him. It's just not my cup of tea. But yeah, that could definitely play a factor too, because we all know how the NBA works. The ownership and the front office, they sometimes, report what they want done or how they want things handled down to the coaching staff. So it could have played a role. Bottom line is the Clippers are still kind of a mess, like they always are. They were never perfect when they had Lob City. They were Chris Paul and Blake Griffin. By the end of that, Chris Paul and Blake Griffin and Doc Rivers and DeAndre Jordan were all not like the best of friends. We know that Blake Griffin signs this big extension where Ballmer's like, we're going to hang the jersey in the rafters, and then trades him 6 months later to Detroit. So the Clippers remain, as always, kind of a dumpster fire. This time it's a little more, internal than it is, with their play on the court. At least they're winning games and being in the playoffs. But yeah, I don't know. And the scary part for them is we could see a world here where after this season, I believe this is after this year, where Paul George and Kawhi have those early opt-outs.
Yep.
So if they don't make it to at least the conference finals, I think you make it to the conference finals, you earn another year. But if they don't, and they get bounced by a team maybe that they shouldn't lose to, do Kawhi and Paul George look at each other and say, hey, let's find somewhere else? I mean, we know Paul George isn't shy about, saying he wants to be traded, sign somewhere else. And Kawhi is privately, I've been wondering about this about him. Kawhi is privately like a semi prima donna, right? He kind of ended that Spurs tenure weird with the not playing and the arguments with the train, like not agreeing with the training staff, and he kind of just sat out. And then next, he kind of requested that trade or forced his way, and then he goes to Toronto. And then, he was like a hired gun, leaves there.
Yeah, sure.
Now we're finding out all these things about how, things get catered around him. And I think we all just love him because he doesn't say a lot and because he's quiet and he just goes out there and has ridiculous games, and he's got the huge hands. And that's what everyone loves about him. But I feel like quietly, like, if he was a louder person, we would be talking about his issues more. And I don't think the media necessarily does. Again, I don't think it's all on Kawhi, but he plays a bigger role in this than I think we realize.
Yeah, and his inner circle is super tight. I mean, in a world where we put everything on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, whatever platform you use, you never see that about Kawhi Leonard at all. And when you do, it's a big news, but it also goes away pretty fast. Like you might hear on a Monday, you might be like, oh, Kawhi Leonard's in a strip club. And by Wednesday, it's like, what did he do again? You already forgot about it. Like his inner circle is super tight. Nothing's getting out. They don't want to get out. But yeah, that's a good point you bring up. Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting, and maybe the Clippers aren't done yet. Like I said, the reports are saying that they're going to probably trade Lou Williams in the next couple of weeks potentially. So
we'll see. He better not go to the Lakers. Huh? That's ridiculous if he does.
Oh no! I've heard Dallas is a suitor. Dallas looking for a bench guy. They're not going to get much. They're going to get like a first round pick or a mid level player. It's not going to be any kind of mega trade, but we'll see what happens there. Maybe they have a couple more moves up their sleeves and whatnot. But it's going to be an interesting year in Los Angeles for sure. I wish we had fans back at this point, because I feel like it'd be that opening night it'd be a ring ceremony night. It'd be Lakers Clippers, and they don't like each other. It'd be Harrell playing. It's going to be Harrell against his former team, which is going to be very interesting as well, because Harrell said some like not so nice flattering things. He basically said that he didn't feel he was wanted and very cared for over there. I think he was a guy who definitely had an issue with the treatment that Kawhi and Paul George received. So it's going to be,
he should, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's going to be a very, very interesting year. I think we'll wrap up here. We could talk about the Christmas games at a later date when we get a little bit closer, because that's a five game slate. Yeah. Henry, in case you noticed, had to dip out. He had some technical difficulties out there in the beautiful West Coast weather. But I do appreciate you guys joining us. And put up the merch store here, as we always try to do. I know there's like I know it's like Nuts and Bolts Sports / merch is like the other one, but this is the one I always find. Head there, get your Nuts and Bolts Sports merch, t-shirts, whatever you need, we got. Lots of cool colors and designs and everything. Definitely be able to check out, nutsandboltsports.com. For all the articles, we got a lot of NBA content. Henry's cranked out like 3 articles this week already. He's been on fire. I have one that's coming up. You have one that's coming out as well, I think.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we can catch you on in the next couple of days? Like, I mean, we know you're podcast, any streams. I know you do like your weekly one.
Yeah. Drop the podcast today, the NBA Sports Hour, and you can find my podcast. I'm everywhere: iHeartRadio, Spotify. Just search the NBA Sports Hour, and then my co-host. I do the NBA Sports Hour with Patrick Waring. Him and I are both big Georgetown Hoya basketball fans. So as if we don't do enough, we have another podcast called Hoya's Weekly. We just talk about the games of the week in Georgetown basketball and kind of where the program is. So yeah, I'm behind the scenes, but also in front of the scenes as well, man. It's fun.
I like that. Like active hands everywhere.
All right, man.
Cool. So yeah, that's it. So all we have for this week. We'll be back Monday talking about whatever breaking news has happened between now and then. And thank you for joining us, and have a good rest of your